Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into the First Indo-Pak War. That's 1947-1948.
Right. The very first direct military clash between India and Pakistan.
Right.
Right after independence.
Yeah. And this connects directly back to our last deep dive, doesn't it?
It does. We talked about the roots of the Kashmir conflict
Yeah.
and Maharaja Hari Singh signing the Instrument of Accession.
That key moment.
Exactly. That legal step really set the stage for this war we're discussing now.
And it's crucial to remember this wasn't just lines on a map, was it?
No, not at all. For so many people, this was about identity, legitimacy,
The new countries.
and honestly, just survival for many caught in the middle. The stakes were incredibly high.
So setting the scene, we're in late October 1947.
The Maharaja has just acceded to India.
And Indian troops are just starting to arrive in Srinagar. That's our starting point.
Precisely.
Okay, so this initial Indian response, the airlift into Srinagar, it sounds simple maybe?
Well, yes, an airlift. But the situation was anything but simple. It was incredibly precarious.
How so?
The airfield itself, Srinagar's airfield, wasn't secure. And you had tribal raiders. Well, alarmingly close.
Right. So if those first plans hadn't landed safely...
It's hard to overstate. Kashmir could potentially have fallen very, very quickly.
Yes.
They were operating on a knife edge.
Wow. Okay. And that leads us, I think, to a really key moment early on, the Battle of Badgam.
Yes, November 3rd, 1947. Battle of Badgam, absolutely pivotal.
What happened there?
You had a small contingent of Indian soldiers, really small,
Outnumbered?
massively outnumbered by the raiders, but they held their ground.
Just dug in.
They fought fiercely. And that resistance, it bought absolutely critical time for more Indian troops to arrive and secure the area.
That sounds like incredible bravery.
It really was. Courage against, well, overwhelming odds. It showed how crucial that early resistance could be. You know, a tactical lesson, perhaps.
And wasn't it during this battle Major Somnath Sharma?
Yes, exactly. Major Somnath Sharma. He made the ultimate sacrifice right there at Badgam.
And he received India's first Paramvir Chakra, the highest military honor, posthumously.
That's right. It really underscores the significance of that specific stand.
So the conflict starts with these tribal militias, but it didn't stay that way.
No, it escalated. And quite rapidly, actually.
How did that happen?
Well, soon you had regular troops from both India and, crucially, from Pakistan getting involved directly.
Okay. So it wasn't just militias anymore.
No. That's the point where it really transforms, you could say, into a full-blown war between the two new nations.
And the fighting spread out beyond just the Kashmir Valley.
Oh, yes. It expanded to multiple sectors. Places like Poonch, Uri, Nowshera. Different fronts opened up.
That must have been logistically incredibly difficult, the terrain there.
Hugely challenging. Mountainous terrain, poor roads, moving troops, supplies, even just communicating was a major hurdle for both sides.
So both armies had to adapt quite a bit.
Absolutely. They were learning and adapting constantly to the environment and, well, to each other's tactics.
Now, let's talk about Pakistan's official position at the start.
Right. Officially, Pakistan denied any direct involvement.
They referred to the attackers as freedom fighters, something like that.
Yes, that was the term used, portraying it as an indigenous uprising.
But what was the reality on the ground saying? Intelligence reports.
Well, the intelligence picture and accounts from the field increasingly pointed towards the presence of Pakistani soldiers.
So not just militias.
Initially, perhaps somewhat disguised or integrated with militias, but later, reports indicated more open involvement of regular Pakistani army units.
Right. A discrepancy between the official story and the facts on the ground.
It's a significant discrepancy, yes. And that became a major point of contention.
And it was this evidence, this apparent involvement that led India to go to the UN.
Correct. In January 1948, India took the issue to the United Nations.
Accusing Pakistan of what specifically?
Of aggression. They framed it as Pakistan orchestrating and supporting an invasion of territory that had legally acceded to India.
Seeking international help, basically.
Yes. Hoping the UN could intervene and, ideally, compel Pakistan to withdraw its forces. It was a move driven by the escalating conflict.
So what did the UN come up with? What was their proposed solution?
The UN Security Council eventually passed a resolution. It had three main parts.
Okay, what were they?
First, Pakistan was called upon to withdraw all its forces, regulars and irregulars, from the region.
Step 1, Pakistan withdraws.
Step 2, once Pakistan had withdrawn, India was asked to reduce its own forces to a minimum level needed for maintaining law and order.
Okay, troop reduction by India after Pakistan leaves. And the third part.
The third part was the most talked about, perhaps? A plebiscite.
A vote.
Yes, a vote organized by the UN to allow the people of Jammu and Kashmir to decide whether they wanted to join India or Pakistan.
Sounds like a plan, at least on paper. But did it actually happen?
That's the critical point. It didn't play out as planned.
Why not? What went wrong?
The fundamental issue was that the first step, the withdrawal of Pakistani forces, never fully happened, according to the UN's requirements.
Pakistan didn't withdraw completely.
Not in a way that satisfied the conditions laid out. And because that first step wasn't fulfilled.
The other steps couldn't follow. The Indian reduction, the plebiscite?
Exactly. The whole sequence stalled. The conditions for the plebiscite were never met, so it was postponed. Indefinitely, as it turned out.
And meanwhile, the human cost was mounting.
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
By this stage, you had over 1,500 soldiers killed on both sides combined, and thousands upon thousands of civilians displaced.
A huge humanitarian crisis on top of the fighting.
Absolutely. For these very new nations, it was a massive challenge.
So this stalemate on the ground and the stalled UN process, that eventually led to a ceasefire.
Yes. With the military situation largely static and the political process deadlocked, the UN managed to broker a ceasefire.
When did that take effect?
January 1st, 1949, New Year's Day. The fighting officially stopped along the lines where the army stood.
And that line where the fighting stopped, that became something more permanent, didn't it?
It did indeed. Initially, it was just the ceasefire line, a temporary military marker.
But it evolved.
Over time, and through subsequent agreements, like the Karachi Agreement later in 1949, which demarcated it more formally, it's solidified.
Into what we now know as the line of control, the LOC.
Precisely. That ceasefire line eventually became the de facto border of the line of control. And it remains, a central feature of the Indo-Pak relationship today.
Still heavily militarized, still contested.
Very much so. Its origins lie right here in the end of this first war.
So looking at the map after the ceasefire, what was the actual territorial outcome? How is Kashmir divided?
The war resulted in a physical division of the former princely state.
Who controlled what?
India ended up controlling about 2/3 of the territory. This included the strategically vital Kashmir Valley, Jammu, and Ladakh.
Okay, the larger portion.
Yes, and Pakistan gained control of roughly the remaining 1/3.
Which corresponds to?
What is today known as Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and also the Gilgit-Baltistan region.
So this division, born out of the war and the ceasefire line, it just stuck.
Essentially, yes. What might have been seen as a temporary outcome of the fighting hardened into a long-term geopolitical reality. It fundamentally reshaped the map.
It's really quite something to think about, all of this happening so soon after independence.
It is startling. We're talking weeks and months after August 1947, before India or Pakistan even had their constitutions fully drafted and adopted.
Right at the very beginning of their existence as independent nations.
Exactly. This conflict erupted at such a foundational moment, and it sort of baked this unresolved issue right into their relationship from the start.
An issue of land, identity, destiny.
All of it. Still deeply felt today.
And this isn't the end of the story, militarily speaking. We're going to continue exploring this in our next deep dive.
We are. Next time, we'll be looking at the 1965 Indo-Pak War.
What was different about that conflict?
Well, 1965 saw a major escalation in some ways. Large-scale tank battles, particularly in the Punjab. Some really fierce engagements is another critical chapter.
Looking forward to that. But circling back to this first war, 1947-48, it's clear it was so much more than just a military campaign.
Absolutely. It laid the foundations, really, for the decades of tension and conflict that followed. It set a pattern.
Shaping the relationship we still see playing out.
Indeed. And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
Just how profound it is that this war happened so incredibly early, right at the birth of these nations. And the fact that it remains, in essence, unresolved.
Yes, a very long shadow.
A very long shadow, yes. It's this initial unresolved question that just keeps echoing down through the decades.
Definitely something to reflect on, how those very first conflicts can define so much for so long. A powerful thought to end on.